Water tastes like.
Free samples.
Take a bottle.
It's usually those are like, you know, who's that? What's
The
going
time
on?
is 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. We're going to begin this evening with, we have several board appointments. So I'll have Janine read most of them, but we do have, I wanted to introduce the first one because this is a new appointment. So I have, I would like to make a recommendation of appointing Bill Abel to the Park Board, and that would be effective on January 21st, 2020, expiring May 31st, 2024. Could we take a consideration on that particular
Motion to
appointment?
approve. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Alderman Waldron and a second by Alderman Berg. Is there any discussion on that appointment? Yes.
I think it's a great appointment.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. And so I'm going to just switch it up a little bit, and we're going to do Bill's oath of office because he's here this evening. So.
Yeah. I get it. I see how that works.
So Bill, if you would join me at the podium, please. I'm gonna just stand on that side so they can see you. So Bill, if you please raise your right hand. I, Bill Abel,
I, Bill Abel,
having been duly appointed to the Park and Recreation Board
having been duly appointed to the Park and Recreation Board
for the city of Moline, Illinois,
for the city of Moline, Illinois,
do solemnly swear that I will support the constitutions of the United States
do solemnly swear that I'll defend the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Illinois,
and the state of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the Park and Recreation Board
of the Park and Recreation Board
for the city of Moline, Illinois,
for the city of Moline, Illinois,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
Go, Coach Bill.
I didn't-
Waldron, you didn't blackball me, did you, Waldron?
No, I haven't told him about you, really.
He doesn't want to admit it.
Oh, he will.
He doesn't want to admit it.
Oh, he's all over.
This is his second one. That's for all the
Thank
cool
you for your
kids.
service. It's a really important
absolutely.
appointment to us, and I really appreciate your leadership.
Thank you again very much, Mayor.
Yeah.
You guys shake everybody's hand. They're very nice.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
Bill.
Thank you very much.
You've done the first ward proud.
Not as proud as you, Alderman.
It's good to see you.
Congratulations. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'll read it, okay. So going back to the agenda, I'd also like to recommend the reappointment of John Canuck, Lauren Schreier, and Don Welvert to the Park Board for 5-year terms retroactive to June 1st, 2019, and expiring on May 31st, 2024.
Move to approve.
Second. We have a motion by Alderman Schoonmaker and a second by Alderman Went. Is there any discussion on these appointments? Alderman Parker.
I'm good with all of them, but this Canuck guy, I just
I
don't
know,
know.
we miss him.
He's not here to defend himself.
I suppose we'll go along with it.
All right, any other comments? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion for reappointments carries. Thank you very much. And then I also have a recommendation to the council for reappointment of Carol Treble and Janet Zam to the Citizens Advisory Council on Urban Policy, CACUP Board, for 3-year terms, retroactive to August 1st, 2019, and expiring on July 31st, 2022.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Went and a second by Alderman Parker. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much for your support of those appointments. We're now going to go into, we have a couple of presentations. We have a very important presentation this evening. The 2019 City of Moline Recycle Superhero Award, and Brad Schick will be, yes, starting.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Every year, the Keep Moline Beautiful Commission reaches out to the community to get nominations for the Keep Moline Beautiful Recycle Superhero Award. And this year, We have a single recipient, but each year it's open to individuals, groups, companies, all sorts of things. So keep that in mind. Essentially, what the purpose of the award is to recognize people, organizations, companies that have done a good job in recycling, repurposing, reusing, and generally keeping our beautiful community better and better each year. So that's the purpose of this, to recognize those efforts. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Berggren, and she is going to go into details about this lovely recipient this year. So.
Hi, I'm excited to be here tonight to tell you about our recipient this year. It's Denise Wassenholt, and we are all familiar with the dilemma of what do we do with all of our stuff. And most of us find ways to sort it, take it to Goodwill, recycle, or my favorite, hide it in my basement. But no matter, it's never a pleasant job, but it is one that most of the time we can handle. But what if you can't? What if there's a serious illness, or a loved one lives far away, or a death in the family? What would you do to help that person? Well, you could call Denise Wassenholt and her daughter Abby, whose business is Lean on Me, and it's to help take care of your stuff. No matter if the things are large or small, it'll be done in a respectful, thoughtful manner for a couple of reasons. Because one, it did belong to someone who cared. And also because we care about our collective home, planet Earth, and we don't want it ending up in the landfill if possible. So Denise is a professional organizer and senior move manager for Lean on Me in Moline and Chicago. And their motto is to meet people where they are in life and enhance the way they live. Denise says her first rule is to utilize local resources, so not to throw anything in the garbage unless it is unsalvageable. As Denise's neighbor, I have witnessed her several times a day taking big containers into her van and leaving and coming back. And also one time standing at the recycling bin with 3 reminders that most people would have tossed in the garbage. She's going through each page to make sure that nothing valuable is thrown away and is recycled properly. With all those years of experiences, Denise has gathered quite a list of resources to disperse her clients' stuff responsibly. Some you'll recognize, some I hadn't thought about, but it also shows what care she does when she has her clients' things. So drop-off recycling, of course, Salvation Army, Goodwill, consignment shops, churches, schools, library, private fires, Rock Island, Scott County, e-waste management, bulk city pickup, metal recycling, furniture repair, Junior Achievement, Historical Society, homeless shelters, Hy-Vee for plastic bags and glass flower vases, and free donation drop-offs to locations of a client's choice. Denise says she also takes care of tons of yarn every year and disperses them in different places, but this year she had 10 contractor bags full, and I asked her what that meant. It means that they're super large and heavy, full of yarn, and she took those to a chiropractor in Moline, who then distributed them to her church for their Christmas projects to make for people in need. So one good repurposing, good deed created many more. One place Denise says most people don't think about is her Hy-Vee contact. And Hy-Vee has been our recipient for recycling here, both the Moline ones in the past. And they use the glass flower vases and the plastic bags they use to deliver them in. And also the Moline Library has been very valuable in giving their Moline Library Friends Room that takes care of the donations. One day Denise and I were chatting in our backyard, maybe over the fence. And I was asking her about her job because I know it must be very emotional at times, because not every situation she goes in is sometimes very difficult. And I asked her about it, and she said, you know, sometimes I just need to sit with them, and we go through a contents in a drawer, item by item. And I thought about that in a larger context because it shows someone cares. And if we all took time, or more often took time, to show that we cared about our stuff and where it ends up, it shows that we care about being good stewards of the environment. And thanks, Denise, for setting that example with Lean on Me. So tonight we'd like to present you with, I knew I was going to get choked up on that, but I really think it's a very emotional situation. And here is our Moline Recycled Heroes 2019 Lean on Me Award. Yes, we love it. Okay. And so Denise, I'll put you in the middle. And give you your beautiful award.
They need me to get in the picture.
Denise, would you please address the council about kind of what motivated you to get involved?
Absolutely. Yes, well, thank you for recognizing me and inviting me. And Chris, thank you. And, oh, I love it. It's on the recyclable. It has a little recycle, so it's made from material that's recyclable. That's awesome. So what the journey that led me down this path is I'm the youngest of 9, and my family had stuff. So when I retired out of Deere & Company, I helped them with their stuff, and then I volunteered, and I realized that there were people struggling with their stuff. And I've never been a stuff person, so I had to really go into the most personal levels of people's lives. And I realized that it was an obstacle, that they couldn't progress in life. So then I realized that I could help them. And I have the patience for it, and I enjoy it. And there's nothing more motivating than to see somebody get over that hurdle and to live life in a more purposeful way. So I'm just glad to be a part of that. So if you see me over at the recycling center, and I'm over there a lot, I'm filling up the bins. I'm sorry. But thank you very much, and I enjoy what I do. And if you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have another presentation this evening. It is regarding public art. And I don't know, Alex, do you want to introduce? Alex Elias is here with us this evening, and she has coordinated all this. But we have Amanda Golden from Designing Local.
Good evening, Alexandra Elias, Moline. We're pleased and excited to be partnering with you for this downtown Moline Public Art Master Plan. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. I just wanted to say 2 things and let Amanda kind of do most of the presentation this evening. We just had a meeting with our Public Art Steering Committee, and we talked about 2 things there. One is that we are designing public art for all ages, all incomes, and all physical abilities. So as we're developing this plan, those things are top of mind. And then the second thing is that public engagement is really important to us. And so we've spent a lot of time during this inaugural visit having Designing Local talk to you, Plan Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, our steering committee, and that's just the rollout of the initial. So we'll be having another series of public meetings in April. But someone said something at our steering committee that I just wanted to make really our mantra. And she was talking about the ability to engage the public and having the desire to have people participate and telling them, we want you to participate. But she said, just rephrasing it changes the conversation completely. And she said, it wouldn't be the same without you. And I really think that's kind of where we're coming from. And it won't be the same without public engagement, and it will be different when we engage each and every aspect of the community. And we're looking forward to that discussion. And with that, I will hand it over to Amanda.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Aldermans, for having us tonight. We're really excited to be here and excited to be in Moline. So when I ask people what is public art, oftentimes we get monumental, right? How many times when people talk about public art do you think white man on a horse with a sword, right? Helmets. Many communities are getting away from that. They're thinking about how to memorialize and celebrate other people who have contributed to history that aren't white men, usually old. In Richmond, Virginia, the community...
No offense to any of those here.
Nay.
I like how all the other guys look at you.
All the heads turn. In Richmond, Virginia, the community spent years thinking about who they wanted to memorialize through a new monument and a new public space. And they selected a woman who helped African Americans learn how to read and write their names so they could register to vote. Really amazing community engagement and a really different way to think about monuments. Public art also creates an opportunity to change mundane things into interesting. This is in Tacoma on the back of a public works garage with the city. These are public works workers who are depicted in a mural in an otherwise really boring, usually stucco, back of a garage. This is in New York. An artist rode the bus for a couple of months and spent time getting to know who was on the bus, and then depicted the people who are riding, their faces along this fence line. So as you walked, you got to see who was going to be on the bus next to you when you got on. Public art also creates unexpected experiences. This looks really fun to me. I hope it looks fun to you. This is something that if I were to see this, I would want to go up and understand how it feels to touch it. Is it going to give back? Is it smushy? Is it hard? These are lit in the evenings, and it causes people to stop and pause and take a picture of themselves or ask someone to take a picture of them. I had to put this deer in here. It's not in Moline. This is in Columbus, Ohio, where I am from, and this is overlooking the river. This is a Terry Allen series. He has 3 deer that overlook the Scioto, and this deer specifically is well loved. You can go past it right now. There's a scarf around his neck. His shoulders have some, different coloration because people's hands have been going across to pose with the deer overlooking the city. It's a really special moment on that bridge that otherwise would just be a bridge overlooking a beautiful river. But when you have public art, it's fun. It causes you to stop and think for a second. Public art can also be functional. This is a wrap on a garage at the San Jose Airport by Christian Muller, and these hands just kind of slightly wave to you around the garage. You don't know if they're saying hello or goodbye. They're fun. And public art doesn't have to be so large that it's like a garage. It can be something as simple as a bike rack. These are in Pittsburgh. The city had different artists create different bike racks throughout the city. You never see a bike on them because people don't know, are they bike racks or are they sculptural elements? They're really fun. And then one of the other things public art can do is increase safety and enhance the aesthetics. This is in Birmingham, Alabama. This bridge was an underpass of a highway, and it, on one side is a neighborhood that is perceived to be unsafe. On the other side is their downtown. And artists came in and created what they're calling the Rainbow Road, and now it's an Instagrammable moment where people are under the bridge taking photos. If this was zoomed out a little bit, there's a girl standing at a column with her dog, having her photo taken, where before people would be like, absolutely not, I am not walking under that underpass. So why does public art matter in communities? It matters because it creates unexpected moments that are don't always have to be very expensive, but things that are really fun. This is in Montpelier, Vermont, in an alleyway that is pedestrian only, and an artist utilized the public utility pole to create what they perceived as a tree, and then to create vines, and there are monkeys kind of swinging all along the backs of these buildings. It also creates really interesting spaces. Fun, right? Everyone's laughing. I mean, how awesome would this be between 2 buildings here in Moline? People would stop, they would pause, they would get out of their cars, they would look at the red ball and be like, who dropped this here? How did it get stuck between these 2 buildings? All these questions would come up, and it would really create conversation and engage the imagination. And I think what we're all here to talk about, everything that a city does is about economics, right? It's all about how do we increase our quality of life where we live. And public art is part of that equation. This is in Portugal. This is a Janet Eckelman piece. This is actually over a roundabout. They thought they were creating a safer space with a roundabout, but really they just created a much larger draw to the center of a roundabout so people could lay under it and look up. But this has become synonymous with Portugal's brand. If you go onto Google Maps, this photo is Portugal's icon, right? And that just became synonymous naturally. The artist did not intend for that to happen, but it happened. But the most important thing that I think public art can do and will do, and what this public art master plan is going to do for Moline, is to really solidify what those community values are that you want to be expressed through public art and through artists working with your community. This is in Atlanta. They have a shared value system of hating traffic and hating cars. So that thing looks like a mouth consuming a car, right? Swallowing it whole. And it's just a fun thing that people can laugh at as they pass it. So how are we going to accomplish all of these wonderful things in Moline? We have just started on our public art master planning process, in which we are seeking out expertise of local leaders and people who care about the city and people who care about public art, and making sure that creativity is at the center of your identity. So my team, which is just me this week, is listening and learning to people all around the city. We've had meetings today, we had a tour today, and we have meetings through the end of the day Thursday there are a lot of people on my list, and that list is continuing to grow because we want to make sure that we hear those voices. Those are happening in individual meetings, but also in focus groups, so that we're able to ask similar questions, but really get different answers from different people who are working in different parts of the community. We also have a presence on Renew Moline's website that I'll share the link at the end of this presentation that I would encourage all of you to go and explore. There's a survey there, and there's also a map tool so that you can begin to input specific data points to help us understand both where you would like to see public art and where you'd like to see special people and stories recognized. The next task, which is really the big meat of this project, is all about community engagement. So how are we engaging the people that live here in a way that is not boring? We will not be holding meetings in this room. We will only be holding meetings in fun locations where people want to come.
This is fun.
And talk.
We are having
It is fun.
This is fun for us.
That makes me
We're
sad.
hoping for a bigger crowd than this, but we're looking to really meet people where they are. And we want to make sure that people who don't feel like they can't contribute to the conversation really feel welcome and really feel like they have a voice in this process. Because again, this is about creating and understanding what those shared community values are, and then allowing artists to express what those values are through arts in your community and in the built environment. The next task is really about defining who Moline believes they are, and then making sure that we're hearing that correctly and putting it back to the public and saying, is this who you think that you are? So we're really providing an opportunity to listen and then putting that information back to make sure that we heard it correctly. And from there, we'll develop those recommendations. And I like to say that there are two components of this plan. There is the really kind of nuts and bolts of the plan, which are policy and process, which everybody else usually doesn't care about. You guys will care about that because you are the city, and that's what makes it great. But then there's this other part, which is all about where is public art going to go, what type of public art is going to go where, and that's what the plan will look like. And those draft recommendations will be presented back to the public as well as the stakeholders to make sure that we heard them correctly. And then finally, we'll be coming back to you with a final plan to make sure that we've really hit the nail on the head and that you feel comfortable with moving a successful public art program through, and hopefully one that will leave a legacy here in Moline and will be able to be built upon for years to come. And I think I stuck to my 10 minutes. So I'll take questions from you, and I'm also going to leave this up here. And if you'd like to talk with me or, have a conversation or just exchange emails or send me ideas, my email's here. Feel free to do that. I'd be happy to schedule a call with you or a meeting or anything else. And my team will be back in April and then again probably in the summer to continue the conversation, both with individuals and focus groups, but also with the greater public.
Are there any questions?
Excited.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We are very excited about what will come next.
Awesome. You're welcome. Thank you all so much. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions on the agenda this evening? Hearing none, we will go into the agenda items. The first item is Diversified Adjustment Collection Agency Agreement. Keith Verbeck, Finance Manager.
Good evening, Your Honor. Every 5 years, the Finance Department goes out to bid for collection services. Last time we awarded the contract was in 2014 year, and the city utilizes one collection agency for all of our billing types. Some examples of our billing accounts that we do send to collections is, the biggest one is ambulance bills. Then we do weed cutting and trash violation bills, city utility bills, parking tickets, and then police and fire false alarms. Those are usually the majority of them. As you remember, hopefully back in October, I was here for our first round of RFP. We had responses back then. They were a flat commission rate fee. And there was discussion on the floor about possibly soliciting a 3-tier pricing structure versus the flat one price. So I decided to do a rebid to make it nice, honest, and fair for all vendors. This time around, we received 8 responses. Of the responses, we had very competitive responses. Ultimately, we decided on Diversified Adjustment Service, and the reason we did is they're located in Minnesota. All their operations, the call center, the finance, the sales, the IT is all out of that location. They are a certified woman-owned business recognized by the state of Illinois. They have 38 years of experience of both large and small government. They handle every type of account that's similar to ours with our city. They pride themselves in quality customer service and ethical collection, which I really respect. They provide multilingual services. And ultimately, we picked them because of their references. They have good, large and small. Their biggest account is with the city of Minneapolis. I had a good response back from them. And so ultimately, the staff is recommending Diversified Adjustment Services. This will be a one-year contract with automatic renewals. And then typically every 5 years, then if we get to that part, we'll go out to bid again. Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Went and a second by Alderman Parker. Are there any questions? Alderman Berg.
Keith, you said that there are 8 companies that replied to your request. Were any of those local companies?
Yes, there was one.
Okay.
I'm not going to get into real nitty gritty, but their experiences with municipal clients were not similar to the one we're selecting. Some of the references that I called were not as appealing as Diversified.
Okay. Question.
Alderman Berg.
And then this company is out of Minneapolis, but did you say that they're certified through the state of Illinois? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yes, as a woman-owned business,
Okay,
so they're the majority owners of that business.
but they don't have an office here in Illinois?
No,
Okay.
Nope.
All
and
right.
the current vendor we're using now, they're out of Pennsylvania. Just to let you know.
Anyone else? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Keith, for your extra work on that. The next item is 2020 seasonal staffing. Allison Fleming from the Human Resources Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This item is for a one-year renewal with Express Employment for temporary and seasonal staffing services. Lindsay Hanna and Shay Ricketts are here in the audience next to Leah Miller from HR. We've been with Express for 2 years now, so this would be our first renewal. They provided excellent customer service, have been very responsive to our needs, and additionally, they have agreed not to increase the markup from the 2018-2019 contract, so staff would recommend approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Went. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
The next item is Chapter 35 Amendment to the Moline Code of Ordinances, Cannabis Zoning Changes. Dirk Price, Corporate Counsel.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. So we're back. We had sent the cannabis issues after we had gotten some guidance from council to the Plan Commission. They had 2 meetings on the proposed text amendments. I want to celebrate the work that Ryan and the Plan Commission did. The 2 meetings were really well done. I think if you listen to the tape, they certainly took on all of the different issues that we had gone through. They wrestled with some of them. The public comment at Plan Commission in both cases was mostly from people interested in running dispensaries here in Moline and encouraging Plan Commission to look for more spaces for those things. And Plan Commission did that. As you see, we went from 2 quarters that we sort of started out with when we were here and we sent it to them to 4, and some of them are much larger. So they were looking for a variety of places they thought would be good. But they were also doing what we asked them to do. They wrestled with all of the sort of sensitive place issues, the definitions of those, and distances from those. And so to take you through where we're at, you've got what Plan Commission unanimously recommended to you after the 2 meetings and the public input. From a staff perspective, Ryan and I have talked about these things, and there are some, and we expect there to be work, and we told Plan Commission this, that this is part of the deal. I haven't been a Plan Commissioner myself for 8 years. You were always wondering why the elected officials did or didn't listen to you, and what you hope to glean from that, and trying to do work as a Plan Commissioner.
Thank you.
Bless you. And so I tried to make that point clear to the Plan Commission that here the final work would be done, we'll wrestle with this, and at the end of the day, that's what people are elected to do and be accountable. And so they understand that there's work to be done here, I think, in terms of some of the boundaries maybe, expanding or contracting them. But in general, as we approach it, we need to look at some of the changes they made to the uses, and I want to highlight those for you. And then also in terms of the boundaries of the 4 overlay districts, and then maybe some of the sensitive setback areas. That's how I intend to guide the discussion, but obviously it's going to be your ordinance at the end of the day. Beginning with the uses, I'd like to start with the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. The council, when we had sent it to them, had asked for things like the transporter and the cannabis cultivation centers to be considered for some of the old big box areas, which were B3 and B4. And again, all of these would be special uses, there would be applications, criteria, hearings. Every specific property, regardless of whatever recreational use we're talking about, would have to go through this process of a hearing at Plan Commission where they evaluate to this criteria. They could put on conditions and make a recommendation to you. So in each individual case, you will see them again, regardless of any of these uses. They're all special uses with some rare exceptions. But they decided that they didn't think the cultivation centers and transporters should be in B3 and B4, and so they struck them. And maybe some of that had to do with the transporter. Those are empty trailers. It's just somebody who's in the trucking business who gets a special license. The cannabis itself has to go from point A to point B. The employees driving the truck aren't allowed to leave it until it's fully unloaded. And then only then could somebody who's based in Moline as a trucking business holding this license store their semi-tractor and their thing and their trailers, which would be empty again. But they struck that. And so the first question on the cultivation center and transporters is if you're content with their recommendation to strike it out of the B3 and the B4. And that's how it's written now, is stricken out. Then that brings us to the dispensary and the overlay districts. And as we talk about the 4, we called them corridors, we didn't know what else to do at that, geographic areas, whatever, but you see that they expanded. We started with John Deere Road general area and the Avenue of the Cities as a general area, and they expanded upon that. They considered the downtown area here, and then also uptown, sort of in the area of, most known if you're trying to look for a landmark, in the area of Rascals, and those folks are here tonight. So those were the 2 areas they kind of added. And as we talk about that, it's a Rubik's Cube that moves in 3 dimensions when you talk about those corridors. Because when we talk about the distances to the pre-existing sensitive uses, some of that, Plan Commission was concerned to make sure we were staying away from certain things. The state has not put any in. So just in terms of the questions I sent around and answers to everybody, the state hasn't put in any restrictions. This isn't like alcohol. There are fewer restrictions here than for alcohol. And Plan Commission looked at that and said, well, we already allow bars within a certain distance. How is this different or not different? In coming up with some of those pre-existing sensitive uses and restrictions on distance, one of the ones that was put in was residential, and we struggled with that. Originally, I had suggested residential being marked to the structure, the dwelling itself, because if you go to the residential property line, it knocks out so many otherwise existing properties that could host a cultivation, a dispensary, could host a bar. And a bar, people are consuming on premises and leaving. In a dispensary, in a recreational dispensary, nobody gets to consume on site. It's strictly a transactional purchase. It's closer to a Walgreens than a bar. And so I know that we're concerned about, we don't want sales around kids and all, but in some respects it's no different than a Walgreens making sales of drugs that are controlled. in and around and nearby. It's a pharmacy in some respects. Yes, we call it recreational, but nobody gets to consume on premises. And so Brian and I, as we've struggled with this and trying to make it work and design the maps around what all the intent was, you might as well forget about the uptown if you're gonna have a distance to a residential area, because there's no way to really make that work. 100 feet or 150 feet, it destroys that corridor as a possible location for a dispensary. And the idea is to drive some traffic and some parking. And there are people who have come and advocated to Plan Commission, your citizens who have advocated to make more areas eligible than less. And so that's the three-sided Rubik's Cube that we're going with, is that as you look at those restrictions, it also impacts the definitions of the corridors, how many you want. And if we have more than two, because the way we wrote it was 2 corridors, 1 per, it could be, we would, if you wanted to have 4 possible locations, and remember they have to go to the state and apply and get their permission from the state. What they need from us, and the reason we're sort of pushing, is because there's a March deadline for the next round of applications, is to say, yeah, we're lined up for zoning. Where we have a location and what looks like to be there is within the realm of zoning permission. And we can help people with that once we get through this process. They've got to go get permission, then they come back and we go through all the particular land use questions. So that's where we're at. Those are kind of the big questions ahead of us tonight, is to try and get our arms around those 4 corridors, if you want them to be redesigned or the maps to change a little bit, and whether or not you're content with the B3, B4. And then lastly, the sensitive uses, if you're content with what Planning Commission did, if you might, my advice is to strike the residential one. I don't think that works. To me, in terms of a land use, once you've allowed a recreational dispensary, it looks more like a Walgreens, even less concerning than a bar, and the bars don't have this restriction. So I might recommend striking that one. But otherwise, that's where we are. And the goal for tonight is to get your changes to this and bring it back for the second reading, because with the March deadline in play for your citizens who want to go and apply, we'd like to keep that ball moving, and there'll be changes between this and the second one, depending on what we do here tonight. And so with that, I think we should begin with looking at, let's take on the transporter and cultivation center. Those are easy. Does anybody, Alderman White?
The transporter question, do we, within the B4, B3, allow for other trucking?
We do.
So what's, if there's not gonna be any product or whatever, what would be the difference between that and any other?
Some of the concern was smell, and also they were worried about the amount of traffic, I think, for those things. Now, that's for the transporter. But they were generally concerned to keep it in the industrial area. They'd like to keep all of these uses in the industrial area. That was the general guiding principle, I would say, is the takeaway.
You know, can we just step back a second? I kind of recommend to the council, what would you think about making a motion in a second to adopt exactly what the zoning commission has proposed, and then we can amend back away from that, if you wouldn't mind doing it that way? That might be a little bit cleaner.
So moved.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Alderman Wendt to accept the commission's recommendations, in a second from Alderman Potter. Now let's talk through any amendments that the council wants to consider off of that. Thank you. So now we're talking about the transporting.
So functionally, though, as far as what the vehicles are going to be, what's going to be in them, there's really no difference between any other trucking, trailer, parking. They'd still have to adhere to all the same, like, whatever our parking regulations, and I don't know if they have to be within a garage or, I mean, you probably would know some of this stuff better than I would.
Where the uses are allowed for for semi-tractor trailer parking, that would be, the same would apply here.
Okay.
They just hold one more special license from the state of Illinois to transport those trailers that do carry the product or infused product or whatever.
I guess my gut is that I'm not sure why we would differentiate between those, because if we have an ongoing business in town that is in a B4 or B3 district, and that's fine, and then they wind up getting this extra license, they're not gonna be able to run out of
That's generally it.
the location that they're currently in, so I'd like to hear from other people, but that doesn't seem, that would put some of our businesses that's already here at a disadvantage, I would think.
Alderman Potter?
Brian, can you remind me, do B3 and B4 both allow for outside tractor trailer storage or that sort of activity on site?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you want to make an amendment?
Yeah, I'll make the amendment to have it mirror our other trucking
Is there a
current
second?
code.
Is that our second for that?
Second.
We have an amendment on the floor by Alderman Went and a second by Alderman Parker. Alderman Parker.
So you mentioned about the odor, but I mean, how is the product transported? Isn't it gonna be in containers or is it just like thrown in a truck and
No,
then they shovel it out
is
somewhere?
Heavily regulated in terms of weight.
Permitted.
It is in containers, it's measured in terms of its weight. You always have to have 2 people in the truck. It's sealed with a seal. Only designated people can break the seal. So, but that is a concern that people have, that it is gonna be, the flower will be transported at some point in its raw state from the cultivator to a processor. And so people are worried that no matter how good the Tupperware is, there might be a smell. But at the end of the day, the trailer is empty wherever it sits, wherever the destination.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
That motion carries with 1 nay vote from Alderman Schoonmaker. So now we have an amended motion on the floor that we're considering. What's another issue that we need to debate?
The geographic boundaries of the corridors. I think.
The geographic boundaries of the corridor?
Yes, so for example, the downtown corridor is on both sides of the bridge, and when we started, there was some discussion about nothing near the highway coming in.
Alderman Went.
We'll get to that in a second, but I think the first location that I'd like to discuss about actually expanding it is I'd like to add in, and whether that's to an existing corridor or add a different one, is one location that I thought would be a good location for this would be out at 6 and 150, out across the river. It's not too far from the interstate out there, but it's not within the heart of the city, but there's good traffic from 74 and 280, as well as there's the TIF out there that could generate some things to increase some activity out in that location. So
Mike,
I'd like to have that
I think the
discussion.
commission was including that area in John Deere. Are you saying they weren't?
The John Deere was supposed to be very expensive. They expanded upon what we had, and there's no reason we can't include it in that area.
Yeah, because I didn't see it on the map that was in the.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, in fact, there's been some discussion when Ryan and I were talking about maybe making it all of 280 south, from corporate limit to corporate limit, and 280 south, and making that the corporate limit. Oh, I see, no, we're north of 280 though, so.
So we
do you
just
know
didn't
where
address
Alderman
that
Wendt is looking
footprint?
at? He's looking at south of that.
Yeah, so it's further down. Yeah.
Yeah, that corner and then 150.
Oh, right in here, got it.
It
Okay.
really-
And this is all industrial. That I think is B2 or B3 or B3
So
or B4.
we can make this corridor go south.
That right is, but this is all industrial.
Okay, so we need to include that, or you're asking?
I would think that might be
Okay.
another location. That
So I think we should probably include everything. Is there an area that we wouldn't want that is
South
south
of 280.
of 280? So we've got, I think, 4 separate parcels out there.
out in the
We've
Beeler
got,
Farms.
we
and
have,
those
yeah,
things?
Case Creek, Beeler Farms, I don't know what the other one is called. And then we've got the area by the airport, and then we've got the one that's further out, closer to Cove Valley. That's all city. Did the commission talk about that?
We talked about that and a little bit. There was, I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Bill Fitzsimmons from the Moline Planning Commission. We talked about that briefly. I think our main focus was on John Deere Road. We talked about flying in, if you recall, we talked about, we could have fly-in service with some kind of dispensary out there at the airport, but I think that was the extent of it. We did mention it, however, it wasn't seriously considered to include it with the John Deere corridor. So I don't think there was a big, a big thought one way or another on it. It was just kind of a passing thought more.
Thank you. Alderman Nguyen.
Well, I think what I'll do in light of that is I'll make an amendment that we add an additional zone that's south of the airport that includes all the I-1 and I-2, which would be that area, and then it's also like this swath over and catches this stuff here, not the farms that we're thinking about.
You don't want to do the one by Co Valley?
No, well, that's zoned R2, and I'm not, at this stage, I'm not advocating then for rezoning those things to.
So it's the I-1 and I-2 south of 280,
Yeah.
adding that.
We have an amendment on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. So we have an amendment by Alderman Wendt to expand to the I areas that are south of the 280. And we have a second by Alderman Parker. Alderman Schoonmaker.
Some of the ground in those zones is still controlled by airport authority, is it not?
Well, I'm not aware of that, but in terms of that, it might be height really.
Okay.
Is they actually own the property and then they control it because they
They
can
own it.
sell it to whoever they want.
Alderman Potter.
We're including this as a dispensary overlay zone?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Alderman Moyer.
So what happens when development happens out there? Will then, because right now with the setbacks and so forth, would those change as development happens? As houses and businesses and
It's first in
schools
time,
come
it's
in?
first in right. So if the dispensary's there, the other development happens around it, they don't have to move.
Any other comments? All those in favor of this amendment consideration, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
That motion carries, that amendment motion carries with one nay vote from Alderman Moyer. Anything else we want to debate? Alderman
I
Burke.
think we're still on the maps. So this Avenue of the Cities that we're talking about on 2700, 2900 block, 28th Street, Area 2. None of those are by a school. It looks like, I can't tell, is Logan School in there or no?
It's a few blocks away.
So the way the overlay district would work is this is the general, it's the Venn diagram setup. This is an area you can look, and then in a particular piece of property, we would take it and then run it through the pre-existing sensitive use setback table. So if a particular property, even though it was within the boundaries, was too close to a school, it would not qualify as being eligible, despite being in the overlay. The overlay is just a general geographic description, then the specific property has to qualify under all the criteria, one of which is setbacks to those pre-existing sensitive uses in that table.
So the yellow line doesn't indicate a 100-foot setback from residential? I assume that's what that was.
But this illustrates part of the problem with the residential setback is then it knocks out all these properties.
Okay, so the pink would be what we would be zoning, and then they would have the additional restriction of setback from churches, or I can't remember where all the setbacks were, but the residential. Okay.
So is this, just to clarify, is this Dolan's property up there where Starbucks and Hafner's and all that is? Or not Starbucks, but,
There's not Starbucks.
no, there's gonna be Starbucks, okay.
Yeah, that's a church.
That's First Baptist Church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the church was that listed on one of ours? Here?
So the only setback was residential? Is that what
No,
came out of the zoning
there's a
commission?
table, but churches were on there, schools were,
Okay.
other things, but not, residential was added, but churches weren't listed.
So is there an appetite to lift that restriction of the residential? Alderman Witt?
Well, And I guess this gets back to from the premises, because it's on two sides. Is it the premises on the residential side from like the side of their building to the side of the parcel in which it's at, or?
We can define it anyway. Other communities that have included some residential component, recognizing how much it knocks out certain areas and that they're content with that, but one of the options available to you is from the property line of the dispensary location to the dwelling itself, as opposed to the residential property line. Because if a residence is set way back in a lot, you've got a buffer to essentially, as I'm suggesting, to a Walgreens, you've got a buffer anyway, so that's the idea. When you zone to the residential property line, now you've knocked out every other property that's 100 foot from anything zoned residential.
But wouldn't you have the same thing on the opposite, like for Dolan's, because he's got a huge parking lot between the building that he's proposing.
Yeah, that's why I
to
don't
put it
want,
into.
that's why I don't want I'm not recommending the residential at all. I think it backs out too many properties that would otherwise be a fit for this type of business.
Are we,
Alderman Waldron?
are we approving these maps right now individually, or if we don't say anything? Like, I don't agree with a couple of the corridors.
Right now, the motion on it is, this is what they recommended, so.
We just amended the John Deere one.
So can I make a motion to eliminate 2 corridors?
Yes. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to eliminate the downtown and uptown corridors.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Waldron and a second by Alderman Schoonmaker. Can you do like the big map so that people can just?
Just for ease, would you mind if we discussed one and then discussed the other?
Yeah.
I think that might, because I'd like to hear, let's talk about downtown first. What are your
Well,
thoughts?
if you might remember our original votes on cannabis, I'm not for it anywhere. So I think that makes it clear, I for sure don't want it downtown or near any residential. So when we talk about the residential and eliminating the residential feet requirement, I'm just the opposite. I would go to 250. So.
I see three of you guys shaking your head. Maybe what might be good is if there winds up being a majority of people that want to look at what the 250 looks like, that may be something that.
It eliminates the corridors anyway.
So maybe that might be a, because it may be moot to talk about all these different things and then the 250 comes up and
Correct,
then
and they go away. I agree.
Or it winds up being like 2 parcels that work.
So do we want to, Your Honor, you want to take the residential one first, or?
No, you're fine with your amendment, because if that fails, then you can offer a subsequent one
For
that
the
would
250.
restrict that.
Okay.
So I think we should consider the amendment that's on the floor. Is there any further discussion about eliminating those 2 zones? That would be downtown and uptown. Mike, Alderman Nguyen, I'm sorry.
I'll go by whatever. I'd like to hear the discussion. Let's talk about downtown. What was the discussion at downtown, pros, cons?
It was brought up at the meeting with, of course, nothing included in the downtown at all. And the first recommendation was 19th Street and then going west to 12th. And I believe from 4th to, 7th, whatever it was. But anyway, that was the original, what was proposed. Then as discussion ensued, they said, well, why not go on the other side of, and I, mentioned the fact that there was, extensive study regarding the entrance to our community from the new bridge. But nevertheless, that area east of the present interstate was included. So there were 2 things that happened, and that was how they evolved. So the end product was, they voted for everything, so.
So this is obviously the current, well, kind of the current
Yeah.
map, but the new bridge will cut through that.
The one on the east.
There was a public comment from a downtown business owner at multiple plan commission meetings that has a location in the downtown. that
Well,
she was-
I'm concerned, I mean, I just like to express my personal concern, and that is visibility off that interstate. That makes me feel very, very uncomfortable about that being our, I think Alexandra would describe it as our front porch. I don't think that's the right impression that we want to give. I think, I think it's fine to have I'm feeling more comfortable about having the business in Moline. I do not feel comfortable with it being the first thing somebody sees when they come across that bridge. So, Alderman Witt?
And hopefully I take this as an amendment just to clean things up so that it's a clean vote. I don't want things to get mixed up. So I'm going to move to amend your amendment by striking the uptown. So then we wind up having just a vote about the downtown one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and then we can come back and you can make an amendment back to do the uptown. But just for clarification, I'd like to move that we strike the uptown from this amendment.
Second.
We have a motion to amend the amendment by Alderman Wint and a second by Alderman Berg. Is there any discussion specifically on this motion
And this
for
is just to clean up,
amendment?
not that-
This is not whether or not we keep it, just to split them apart.
Yeah.
All those in favor of splitting them apart, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So that amendment carries. So now we're just discussing the downtown corridor. Alderman Berg.
Mayor, I have a question, and I'm not for sure, but on 7th Avenue, behind the old fire station, there's a low-income housing. Now, isn't there some sort of distance that needs to be, Dirk, from a low-income housing unit?
There's nothing in the state statute.
Okay.
Alderman Wint.
On this, does it look like it hops over by 19, and it leaves the LeClaire out? I mean, was there a reason why that swath?
That was the visibility component. I think the plan
Oh.
commission felt if they moved it back,
Okay.
it was addressing some of those concerns.
Okay.
Yeah, but the new interstate
Bridge
goes
is
right
right
through
through it.
there.
Yeah.
Was that the intent? No?
Again, are we talking about the eastern portion?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was tacked on at the end.
Oh,
Okay.
And the original focus
okay.
was
Okay.
everything west of
Okay.
19th Street, so that the visibility problem wouldn't come into play. That was part of, at least my thought,
Uh-huh.
on it. And as a matter of fact, I made some suggestions about that, and it's on recording. So, but anyway, that's, my original concept was just the core downtown area, the storefronts, those buildings that could be redeveloped. That was what was going through my mind, and I think through some of the other people that were in attendance that day. And I think we had almost 100% attendance, so
Good.
it was a consensus.
So, I mean, I still am a very strong believer in that, but we could perhaps consider that if the downtown stays in, maybe consider knocking that part out to control that visibility part,
I
just
like
in
that.
case. But you all might vote to get it out completely. Alderman Parker.
I personally am in favor of not including the downtown. There's a lot of places with a very finite number of licenses that will be available. There's a lot of places in Moline that could use the additional traffic to help spur on potentially more development. I don't think it kind of fits with what we've tried to develop and encourage and cultivate in the downtown area. So I'm not going to be voting to include the downtown area.
Alderman Potter.
I'm wondering if the eastern section might be better for, and I appreciate your comments about not wanting a dispensary in view as people enter our front porch. I'm wondering if maybe if we shorten that area up to 21st Street or 22nd Street, if that might got a whole different flavor on the east side in terms of atmosphere. I wouldn't call that our downtown at this point.
Like the Parkside area.
Yeah, pardon.
Any other discussion on downtown being in or out? Okay, so everyone in favor of excluding the downtown area, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Everyone in favor of including the downtown area, please indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
Sorry, that was kind of backwards, wasn't it? Does everybody know what they voted for?
Yeah.
So the downtown area will be excluded with one opposing vote by Alderman Williams. So now we're back to the main motion. We've got a few amendments on it. It's okay to continue to add amendments, isn't it? Okay, so I don't know if we've split the original, so why don't you remake your motion for?
I would make a motion to eliminate the uptown corridor area, whatever you want to call it.
Second.
We have a motion to eliminate uptown by Alderman Waldron and a second by Alderman Schoonmaker. Do we have any discussion on that specific area? Alderman Parker?
Kind of like what I was, excuse me, kind of like what I was talking about with downtown. Uptown area, there are a lot of empty storefronts. There's a lot of need to drive traffic up in that area. You know, it's hard for me to tell exactly what parcels, you know, based on the fact of buffering from residentials would be available. But that is an area that could use some additional or new type of retail business up there. Might help encourage others to put in other businesses as well. I would be in favor of the 15th or the uptown corridor plan.
Alderman Witt.
And I'd like to reiterate that it's the kind of where I am with this, that this feels like an area that could really use, and if you read through the state statute,
Yeah.
This is exactly what the state was trying to focus on, is low mod income area to generate. In fact, anybody who's applying for a license actually would get additional points because this, the census tract that this is in. So I'll be supporting this.
Is there Alderman Schoonmaker?
A couple things. It was mentioned that limited number of licenses. We got to be kidding ourselves if we think that's going to stay limited. That will increase, and there will be more and more. That's just the state we're in. It concerns me the effects on property values, what that's going to do to a neighborhood. You know, you don't want your, first. How'd you say that, Dirk? First there, first right, first.
First in time is first in line.
Right, so, you're not gonna have a daycare open in this low to moderate income neighborhood now because they don't wanna be located next to that. You're gonna have other issues. And do we really believe it won't be consumed? I understand it won't be consumed on site, but as they walk away, drive away, let's face it, that's why we're trying to make modifications to the alcohol policy, because we're trying to stop the consumption that's as they walk away. This will be consumed, and you're in a very residential neighborhood, very walkable neighborhood, and there will be issues and ramifications to deal with from that.
Thank you, Alderman Schoonmaker. Alderman Burke?
Isn't this close to Seton School?
Willard.
Pardon me?
And Willard.
I,
And Willard.
Two schools.
okay, yeah, 2 schools, okay. Is it a possibility that maybe we could shorten this up a little bit? Would that help? I don't know.
Can you point
Can
to
you show
Seton?
where
I think
it's-
Seton's that
My vote.
green.
Yeah, north of. Yeah. to
Where's
the left.
Seton School on there?
Right in the middle.
In the middle of it, did you say?
South.
I got the address 1320 16th Avenue.
Between 16th and 17th.
Yeah, so
It's
it's
at
south
the-
of that,
yeah.
right to the left.
Yeah,
Right
that
there.
green.
Right there. And
That
middle
right.
school behind it.
And then Willard's where now on the other side?
16th and 16th.
Yeah.
How many feet would you estimate?
Just not a
I don't know if it's something possibly that we could probably shorten it up there on that first crease. So it'll go from that top end down to that corner,
Well,
Ryan?
that's where there's that pinch right there is, I think, from the schools, right?
Yeah, it's the buffer from.
Right, but I'm thinking maybe cutting it off, if you take it down to that arrow up there. Keep
I
going
thought there
a little
wasn't a
bit up.
setback from the school.
Oh, the yellow is
Oh, there
the,
is a setback.
It's not, just not churches.
Just not
Oh,
churches.
churches.
but
Okay,
the
thank you.
yellow is the setback from the residential, which disqualifies every property it runs through.
Good.
So we'll have that conversation in a second. Anybody else want to weigh in on this area, uptown area? Alderman Williams?
I'm afraid the genie's out of the bottle, and we're hemming in and nitpicking. As a former police officer, we've done search warrants all around there, right next to the schools. There's people selling pot all over the city. To now say that we want someone that's going to be so well regulated and to hem them into a tiny little spot and somehow that's going to keep anything from exploding, we're only kidding ourselves. And you're right, it's not going to. In 10 years from now, there's going to be pot sold all over the place. So that if we're going to sell our soul to the devil and go all in and let people, run these businesses, let's let them do it, because we're not going to stop it. It's too late. It's here. So I would support it.
That was the most negative support I've ever heard. Alderman Parker?
Regarding the churches I think it was schools is what we were talking about. Regarding the schools, there is if they do fit the guidelines, again, it's like, I think it's going to be a lot like selling at Walgreens. Although I didn't go when we were in Colorado, I did see these places and they're not like a bar at all. I mean, it's just to get in and purchase your product and get back out. It is going to be like a Walgreens. And so, we do have those, close to all sorts of things. I don't think having a dispensary, 3 blocks from Willard School or 2 blocks or 1 block from Willard School is going to really, harm the children that go to that school.
Again, there's no state regulation about schools or anything like there is for bars, churches. Like
But they're
there is
also
for
not
alcohol.
consuming there too.
Yeah,
So that's a
in
big
fact,
deal.
the only
That's a big-
restriction is you can't be within 1,500 feet of another dispensary.
Now.
Alderman Moyer?
So I understand the genie out of the bottle argument, but once you legally as a city say it's okay to sell here, you have a business there, you're sending a whole different message to the, right now it's illegal and it's still being sold there. I get that. I'm just not in favor of saying, yeah, it's sanctioned now.
Are there any other comments? Alderman Burke?
Can we cut this? I mean, can we, cut that in half, I guess?
You can make a motion.
Motion, can I make a motion that we stop it at 16th Avenue and have it end there rather than continuously all the way to 19th Avenue?
So you're wanting to amend the,
So you cutting the top off or you cutting the
The
bottom?
bottom half,
Cutting the bottom off.
yeah. The top half is the downtown, it's towards downtown, right?
Right.
Yeah.
North.
So I'd cut that top half off and just stay from like 16th Avenue on.
so your amendment is to split this consideration,
Correct.
basically? So we'd be discussing the section that is closer to downtown or
Yeah.
further from downtown for elimination?
I'd like to eliminate the one that's further from downtown.
Further from downtown?
Right.
Okay.
The south part of it or the north part of
The
it?
south part of it, eliminate the south part of it.
Okay, good.
So
Gotcha.
cutting this
Talking
piece
about
off.
blank.
Yes,
So this would remain where my cursor is?
yes.
From 16th Avenue north.
Which is a little,
The
which
13th,
is
not much.
shorter area, and we still can't have
Not
two
much there,
over 1,500 away from each other, correct?
Yep.
Is your place in there?
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor to split this consideration. Is there a second for that amendment? I'm sorry, motion dies for lack of second. So we're still considering the uptown. Is there any further discussion on including or excluding uptown? So the motion on the floor is to exclude uptown. All those in favor of that exclusion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed to the motion, please indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
I believe that the nays have it with aye votes with Alderman Moyer, Alderman Schoonmaker, and Alderman Waldron. Is that right? So uptown will remain. Do we want to talk about that residential setback? Is anybody wanting to, it's in right now.
It's
So
in it.
You can motion to expand it, or you can leave it.
It's in right now from the
At
property
100.
line. 100.
I'd make a motion to expand it to 250 feet.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor to expand the residential setback from 100 to 250 feet by Alderman Waldron and a second by Alderman Schoonmaker. Is there any discussion on that expansion? Alderman Nguyen.
Do we have any idea how that's going to affect?
It would basically, this yellow line would be more towards the road, and it would be.
Perfect.
It would basically.
That would eliminate.
I answered the question.
But it's for everything in the city. What about like down at the
Avenue of the Cities.
the Avenue Cities? Because the Avenue Cities would be eliminated too, right?
If we made those types of motions, we'd probably just redo the maps so that you could see specifically what that looked like. But yes, like here, for example, it would exclude more parcels here and.
Everything else would be already excluded.
Correct, it would just
Yeah.
become much tighter and exclude more parcels.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of expanding the residential setback, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed to that expansion, please indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
I think that might be a split vote. Was that 4-4?
I think so.
Okay, so we have a split vote. The four that were in opposition to the amendment were Alderman Potter, Went, Parker, and Williams.
Okay.
So I get a vote on that, and
Yeah.
I do not vote to expand, so I'm a nay on that. So that motion fails. Alderman Went.
So just for clarification, if we don't eliminate the residential setback, this 15th is, even though 5 of us said to keep it, it's eliminated by virtue of the residential setback.
Right, as defined now, because it's to the property line.
So would it eliminate those if we changed it to what you said, to the premises, or do we?
The structure.
To the structure, sorry, yeah.
It would be pretty close.
So there'd be a couple more in, not many.
It would still be difficult, because
Yeah.
these, for example,
The
these
alley's not
houses are
100
so
feet.
close to the,
And then it's to that
right,
property line, not to that structure, right?
Right. It helps the AOC a little bit more than this. It doesn't really help the.
Then I'm gonna move to eliminate the residential setback.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Went and a second by Alderman Parker to eliminate the residential setback that's proposed. We're all being cool. Is there any discussion on it? Alderman Moyer.
So, given that yellow line, as it stands right now, actually cuts off some of those buildings, can you subdivide your property then, or?
no, it would exclude a dispensary from being there at all.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The question was about subdivision, Alderman,
Okay.
and the answer is no, there's not a possible way to do that with
You'd be
legal lots.
creating an unbuildable lot, it would be too small of a lot to
Okay. Alderman Schooling.
Just clarification, so completely eliminate, there would be no setback change from residential, it could be property line to property line, bordered, right on top of each
Well,
other.
I'll tell you, like, what I'm going to suggest is, after whatever this vote is, to, because this is just committee of the whole, is that also ask us to direct staff to give us a map, what it would look like, structure to structure. But they can't provide that to us right now. So, I think.
Well, then why don't we table the vote and wait until we have that?
Well,
Hear from.
We've got a
consent.
time frame.
We can make the amendments, you have a 3-reading process.
Yeah.
You have 2 more readings after this, and that gives you the benefit of being able to make these in process, but your constituents do have a March deadline. If you don't want them to make it, that's fine. But in trying to make that, the plan commissions move forward, and in hopes of making that for the sake of the people who came to the hearing, we can do that in between this one, and there's another reading after that still.
And I will add that the underlying zoning regulations would apply, so the buffer that's required between the NC zone and the residential zone, the landscaping requirements, those buffers would still apply. So there would still need to be some sort of buffer between those uses.
What would be an example of a buffer?
So it would be, for example, like a certain number of plantings, hedges, a fence,
Like
those
what they
types
did
of
with,
things.
like Clint's up when they.
They'd have to meet the landscaping ordinance still.
Alderman Potter.
I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better just to direct staff to do it from structure at this point then? Why don't we do it that way rather than just eliminate the?
Are you recommended like 100 feet from structure to structure? Oh, but I have no idea what that results in.
We can bring it back for the next reading,
So-
whatever the outcome is tonight, we'll bring that back for the next meeting so you can show it to them.
So it would be measuring, for example, where my cursor is here to there
Correct,
versus the property line itself.
correct.
We have an amendment on the floor, and we should probably take the vote on this amendment, I think. And if we want to adjust it, we're able to amend it during the subsequent readings. It won't be a significant modification.
So the amendment is to completely remove the residential.
That's correct. That's what is on the floor at this time. Is there more discussion on eliminating the residential setback? All those in favor of eliminating the residential setback, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay. I'm a nay.
You're a nay. So that motion fails. We have nay votes of Alderman Potter, Moyer, Schoonmaker, Waldron, and Berg. Alderman Potter.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the ordinance to 100 foot from structure to structure
Second.
in the residential.
We have a motion by Alderman Potter and a second by Alderman Nguyen. Did you catch that motion?
I didn't, I'm sorry.
It's a 100-foot setback from what?
Structure to
Structure to
structure.
structure. Thank you. I
Dispensary
couldn't think.
structure to the residential, no, across the board, from the recreational cannabis facility to the residential structure, the dwelling.
And so that
That's
would
exactly-
not
Principal
be,
dwelling.
that would
That's
not include a
exactly what I
garage, right? Because we got
That would
into
not
trouble.
include a garage. it's
The
principal
residential
dwelling.
structure.
Right.
Alderman Schoonmaker.
Can we have some comments from what effects that would have on zones or?
That would make more properties eligible in the uptown area and would also help AOC. The back alley is the concern here in uptown, that if property line to property line, it's not gonna be sufficient. But from structure to structure, some of those will qualify. We're not including,
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
what's it?
I'm trying to understand how we would be able to do that exercise in GIS, because our layers do not have the exact,
Yeah,
it's
no,
almost like it would be a case-by-case scenario, so if it came
would be.
in, the map would not be able to really show you. We get close, but I'm just letting you know that.
In
if we
terms of
run
the
that
presentation
exercise-
next week, yeah,
Right,
that's
next
fine.
week.
But in terms of an application, the individual applicant would have to come in and show with a survey that they meet the 100-foot setback.
Or
Alderman
apply for
Potter.
variance.
Well, you have to authorize variances, and you haven't here.
Okay.
If by eliminating it, that was just part of the overall special use inquiry. But when you've got a hard number without a variance,
Okay.
Alderman Potter.
And the maps and the lines that are being provided are purely for illustration purposes, are not, as you suggest,
Right.
defining exactly what structures fall within or without.
yes and no. The maps we're providing show where the overlay district is.
Correct.
But the yellow line is an estimate of what's out there.
Okay, that's fine.
So we still have this amendment on the floor. Is there any other comment? 100 feet. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Is that a split vote? Is that 4-4? So we have 4 nay votes from Alderman Moyer, Schoonmaker, Waldron, and Berg. And the split, my decision is to go with the, let me think about that. So right now, what it is, without the amendment, is 100 feet from property line to structure.
No, just the residential property.
Property line to property line. This amendment is 100 feet from structure to structure. I'm in support of that amendment. So that motion carries, that amendment carries. Alderman Nguyen.
I'd like to make a motion to insert a variance mechanism. Can we, and point of inquiry, can we make that variance be subject to council approval?
We can, I can write it so that the 100-foot residential setback, as now redefined, can be varied as part of the special use process upon good cause shown. And I can write that into the special use application.
Okay, but that the ultimate decision to allow for that variance is voted on by
As
the
with any
council?
special use,
Okay,
Oh, I thought special
No,
use was
special
handled by
use- The
staff.
special use would just be approved at the plan commission.
But could we change it that that would have to come to council?
Yeah.
Okay, that's my motion.
Okay, so if there is a variance, it would go to the council level, but typically would be retained at the plan commission level if there's no variance and it meets all other regulations.
Or do you want all of these special uses to come here?
My motion is for all of them.
Even separate from cannabis?
No,
just
all
the
cannabis.
cannabis
special
The
uses.
cannabis is
And
not.
are you suggesting that we would allow a variance for every aspect?
No, that we would have the ability for setback to provide a variance for setback, but that would be given at this level, because it's not at the plan commission.
So we have a motion on the floor to allow for a variance application, is that what you describe it?
Yeah, it'd be a variance to the residential setback requirement, and that all of the special uses come to city council for recreational land uses, or,
Yeah.
all of them.
All of
All special uses for recreational cannabis land uses come to city council.
But right now, in the ordinance, the only ones that are the special use is just the dispensary. So those other things we talked about before, just to clarify, like the transporter and all those things, are permitted by right in the industrial zones.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you all understand that amendment? Is there a second?
Second.
We have an amendment by Alderman Wendt. Do you understand the amendment?
I do, thank you.
And we have a second by Alderman Parker. Is there any discussion regarding that amendment? All those, Alderman Wendt?
Oh, I'm just to my fellow aldermen on the other side of the aisle. I encourage you to support this because it gives you more say in any of these locations that may possibly come up.
I would argue the opposite. It gives you less say. Now we're going to put it 50 feet, 25.
No, but every special use permit comes here. Without this,
to be voted, maybe 4-4 for 25 feet.
or to the people who unanimously increased and had more locations than what this is.
Wrong.
Alderman Schoonmaker.
There's no right for a variance at this point unless we vote for this.
Correct.
Yeah, so if
But-
we
but
vote
also-
for this, he's correct.
But also the special use permit doesn't come here.
He's trying to sweeten the deal
No,
for you.
it,
It's not sweet enough. It's not sweet
Apparently it's
enough,
not sweet
Alderman
enough.
Wendt.
All right. Trying.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
nay.
Alderman Potter, I missed your vote.
I'm a nay.
You're a nay, so that was, I believe, 5-3, and that amendment does not pass. It was Alderman Potter, Moyer, Schoonmaker, Waldron, and Berg. Nay votes.
Thank you.
Does not pass. What do we have left?
I don't have it.
Alderman Waldron.
I'd like to make a motion to add to the pre-existing sensitive use list churches. And I would like them to be, I'll try, 250 feet. Partly because it can't be much different than the park, the library, and elementary school. It should be 250. So I want to add churches at 250 feet.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Waldron to introduce a setback of 250 feet from all churches. And we have a second by Alderman Berg. Is there any discussion on the church setback? Alderman Moyer.
I would just say that many of the churches also have daycares or childcare, so I would assume that they would be falling in line with the.
Are daycares included in the
They are.
previous
Yeah.
setback?
They are.
We listed that, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So they
So,
may
yeah.
already have a setback anyway? Is that what you're?
they may, but they may not be included because they may not be as formal as say, a licensed daycare.
No, they have it state licensed daycare home.
Yeah, that's why there's that pinch by Seton, because there's a daycare.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion on the church setback?
Can we add, Mayor, I mean, if we're adding that one, can we actually add low-income housing as well?
What?
Section 8 housing?
Would you
Section
mind
8?
doing a separate
Separate?
consideration for that?
Well, on the church amendment, is that church property line or church structure? What you want?
I think they're trying to
Oh,
replicate the
Property line?
the school.
Property line.
Is
You
that
knew where
the
I
way
was
the
heading.
school is set? Dirk?
Yes, the school is
Property line to property line?
Correct.
Okay. And then he's gonna open more churches real quick. So, is there any further discussion? All those,
I would just add this. One of the reasons we didn't go with churches is because they pop up in industrial areas. And we've been trying and send these folks for some of these uses to the industrial areas. And if you put a church in and one pops up in a storefront at 250 feet to the property line, you've now taken out a whole chunk of John Deere Road, the areas down there. Because
That's okay.
churches like to show up in industrial parks now.
Are you trying to make my argument?
No, I'm
Because you're
explaining
succeeding.
why Plan Commission, we thought about churches and then didn't.
Alderman Schoonmaker.
That goes against what you said before about first right. So if the dispensary's there and a church shows up, that's the church. The church chose to build
True,
next to it. That
but if the
doesn't-
church shows up between now and the second or third round of applications, you've taken out the industrial.
And that goes back to, oh, there's very, very limited licenses. We're only gonna have one or two of these in all of Moline. And your argument, I believe, is correct. There'll be a second, third, fifth, sixth round, and they'll be everywhere. There's plenty of places that aren't next to a church and a school and a house that they could be in Moline. If we have to have them, let's put them in places where they're not gonna be right on top of other uses.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the church setback, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
I didn't catch the votes. Can we do a roll call real quick? Sorry.
Sure. Alderman Potter,
Nay.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg. Aye. Williams,
Nay.
Parker,
Nay.
Went.
Nay.
It's split, Mayor.
Nay. I know it's hard.
Sonia's so disappointed.
It's
What am I
hard.
putting out at your house?
All right. Okay,
So I make a motion can I make a motion?
Yes.
That we add in low-income housing.
What does that mean?
That means.
Setback.
You said section 8. Section
No,
8
I
is
didn't say
done
section 8 just now.
earlier you
I
did.
said low, I know, this is a new motion,
Okay.
Alderman Went. Low-income housing.
Okay.
Okay.
How do you want to define that?
Yes, how is that defined?
Yeah.
Because we got rid of the downtown one, so the one you were concerned about there is no downtown corridor.
Right.
So which ones are you concerned of, so we know how to define low-income housing?
Because there's no low-income housing anywhere near any of these
No,
zones.
there's not.
No.
And there's not one at the Garfield ones either.
No, there's no.
41st
Okay,
Street.
I was just trying to, okay.
She can still make the motion. Do you want to make the motion?
No, I'll withdraw my motion
Okay.
because Alderman Went.
Okay. Is there anything else we have to decide? Because I think we're about done. I think we're losing our
I don't have
patience
anything
with
else
this whole
on
process. Alderman Moy.
I'm just wondering if we should reframe
What does it take?
Alderman Waldron's church amendment to try 100 feet.
Second.
To be clear, from the property line.
From the property line.
Okay, so
Who was the
Alderman
second?
Moyer.
I'm sorry, Waldron or
I think it was Alderman Waldron. It was, so Alderman Moyer has proposed a 100-foot setback regarding churches.
Regarding churches.
And Alderman Waldron has
be 50
provided a
feet.
second. Is there any discussion on the 100-foot? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
I believe the split is the same. We've got nay votes from Moyer, Schoonmaker, Waldron, and Berg. And then, so it's a split, and I vote.
You haven't voted with us yet.
Those were, oh wait, no, I said that backwards. I'm sorry, Janine. They were voting for the setback. Those were the aye votes, forgive me. You guys got me confused now. So the nay votes were Potter, Went, Parker, and Williams. And my vote is nay as well. It
You're
is-
siding with the Easters. over
I know.
The people in the
What?
East.
What?
The East people.
I know, this is
You
kind of a
said-
weird split. I wouldn't have expected this.
No, this is, yeah.
Alderman Went.
I'd like to reconsider the motion to bring the special use decision to this body.
Second.
We have a amendment by Alderman Went and a second by Alderman Parker. So the special use consideration would be decided at this council floor. Any discussion? Alderman Schoonmaker.
Can you?
It's good for you.
Can you explain what you're
I
trying to
think
accomplish here?
that I think that this is a contentious enough item that it is continuously split here. While I think ultimately on a lot of things, this side has won. I think that this is important enough that when we're going to be providing a special use for this, it should probably come here and get everyone's input on any additional regulations or things on it, because these aren't just permitted by right. And so I think that they're important enough that at this time, this body have a discussion on them.
Can I ask a question of Dirk? Dirk, when you're deciding in support of or against a special use permit, are you allowed to use whatever criteria you want, or are you restricted?
So, it's the criteria you publish in your special use permitting criteria, and that, you're supposed to make your decision with respect to that criteria. But that said, the criteria are broad policy-based criteria in some sense. So there's specific dimensions and distances, but then there's also the general welfare of the community. So yes, you're supposed to stick to the published criteria, but the criteria give you some extensive elbow room in your decision.
And that decision-making would be held normally at the planning commission, and we're transferring that authority
The plan
up to the
commission, yes,
council.
Mayor, the plan commission would still hold the public hearing.
Mhm.
They would still gather the evidence, and then they would make a recommendation to you and forward to you what was done at the public hearing. You're not bound to that in the sense of like an appellate court, if you will, where you're the record established below. You get, and you could add conditions or not conditions, because at the end of the day, land use and zoning is a policy-making decision, and you can vest that authority in plan commission as you have, or you can, for this particular subset is now being suggested, put it back in your hands.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, Alderman Schoonmaker?
Clarification, so you're peeling apart your prior,
Yes.
you're taking the
I'm
variance.
just giving you the sweetness, not the pill.
You're peeling the variance
Yeah, exactly.
off, and
Because I still think it's a good idea.
Okay, no further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
We have one nay vote by Alderman Williams. Or, I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. Alderman Waldron, sorry. Alderman Waldron, that motion carries. So the final special use permitting will be established at the council floor with the recommendation of the planning commission. Are there any other topics that we're missing here? Does anyone have any additional amendments? Alderman Witt.
I would like us to direct staff, even though it failed, to come back with some examples of known locations where we think that people have put in an application or an RFQ. What would RF?
We
what
had,
do do?
we had proposals. We had like 20 proposals,
Yeah.
but I don't know if they all designated a location. I don't recall
For the ones that
that.
did on what the structure to structure at 100 feet would look like to those.
Okay. The one that did for sure was in
Alderman,
this downtown.
would you consider holding that motion so we keep it separate from the ordinance?
Okay, yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
that's my fault.
So we have an amended, do you want to run through the amendments for us right now so that we know what we're voting on?
Sure.
So it's what the planning commission, I can remember, what the planning commission
I got it.
established. Okay, all right, Dirk's got it.
We're adding the I-1 and I-2 south of 280 to the John Deere corridor, quote unquote. The downtown corridor, was defined by the plan commission, has been excluded. The 100-foot residential setback has now been changed from property line to structure to structure. The special use is to come to council for final decision. That's it.
Do you have a common understanding, everyone?
Do we add the trucking into, or did that fail?
No, that did pass.
Oh, yeah, trucking is to mirror our existing,
Trucking.
existing B3, B4, right? That was not-
Alderman Waldron.
Your Honor, since we're in the mood for reconsiderations, I'd like to reconsider the ordinance totally and eliminate it.
There would need to be an amendment, so would your
No,
amendment?
I'd just like to eliminate the cannabis ordinance.
Well, I know, but we have a motion on the floor right now, so the best you can do is amend it, or let this vote happen and
I'd
then.
like to amend what's on the floor to eliminate the ordinance totally.
Okay, so to eliminate cannabis
Just strike
resale or everything, anything to do with marijuana.
Correct.
Second. Okay, we have a motion we have an amendment on the floor by Alderman Waldron to eliminate all considerations of cannabis business, and a second by Alderman Schoonmaker. Is there any further discussion? Alderman Waldron.
I want to go back to that genie. We have clearly allowed the genie not only to crawl out, but to dance outside the bottle. We've made modification after modification already, and we haven't even got a store here. I think we've heard enough to know that we don't want this here. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Alderman Waldron. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of Alderman Waldron's amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
We're gonna have to do a count on that. Could you do a roll call, please?
Sure. New page. Alderman Potter?
Nay.
Moyer?
Aye.
Schoonmaker?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Berg?
Nay.
Williams?
Aye.
Parker?
Nay.
Went?
Nay.
We're split, Mayor.
Nay. That motion fails.
It's close.
It was close.
Raise your thing.
So,
I'm gonna remember.
I know. Hey, you lied. Okay, so, Alderman
I had a
Parker.
question. Up on the Avenue of the Cities, and this is, can I just ask you a question? On the Avenue of the Cities at the Dolan property, because don't we have an agreement that they're gonna do a phase 2 with residential? Would that, even though cannabis, if they put a
Yeah. Just wait.
location in there before they put in the resident, I mean, how's that work?
Just wait and build it afterwards.
We'll give them a variance.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
We
didn't,
can't.
I'm not prepared for that question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I just don't know the
Crossed my
Dolan
mind.
agreement.
Might be a good
All
one
right,
to
is there any
follow up
further
on.
They
discussion?
might lose all of it.
So we are now considering the amended motion on the floor. No further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Alderman Potter?
Aye.
Moyer?
Nay.
Schoonmaker?
Nay.
Waldron?
Nay.
Berg?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Parker?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
Five ayes.
That motion carries.
I only said aye because I knew the mayor would say nay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and
That was fun. Okay.
do you want us to vote on that direction to staff, or?
I think we can just give them a direction. Can you come back to us with a general understanding of what that 100-foot residential setback looks like to the properties? And then if you can do anything with the rest of the zones to better indicate who's in and who's out, that'd be helpful too. But we don't expect it to be perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we good? Okay, the next item is the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, MOU. No, I skipped one. Did I skip one?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
The
Chapter
uniforms.
26, Amendment to the Moline Code of Ordinances, Police Uniforms. Dirk Price.
So when the chief got here right away, started making his way through the ordinances, and in part because we had immediately an issue, to chief's credit, with trying to make grant work. There's certain uniforms that were not fitting together. We had a grant, we had to spend it in a certain way, also tied up in the budget, and wrestling with JD on this. So we came to have to make some decisions in real time, and after making those, and everybody's happy, and you save the city some money and all the rest, came across the ordinance that says all uniform things are supposed to come here for a decision about whether or not the vest and the skew that the chief made sure to fit our ballistics and our bulletproof vest fit together. Somehow that's supposed to be decided here. And as we peeled back that onion, to use an analogy we've been using tonight, we found out that that hasn't been the case. People haven't been bringing it here. I am of the opinion that if you're not going to use an ordinance and enforce it, get it off the books. Also, it would have been in the way. You would have lost grant money, and you would have cost yourself some money if you had to try and do that. And so, after talking to the chief, for those reasons that if we're not going to use an ordinance and you traditionally aren't been enforcing an ordinance, take it off the books and put this in role where it belongs, which is, like most municipalities, is in the decision and judgment of the chief of police.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Potter, a second by Alderman Wint. Is there any discussion on this? All those in favor, please indicate, did you have a comment, Alderman Williams? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
The next item is the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, MOU, Chief Galt.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you today, I have an MOU to begin using the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network System at the Davenport Police Department. So before I ask you for a consideration on that, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background information on what this is. We talked about it a little bit at the budget workshops because I requested some money for the training. But NIBIN, the acronym NIBIN, is the only national network that allows the capture and comparison of ballistic evidence to aid in solving and preventing violent crimes involving firearms. Since 1999, there's almost 16 million images in NIBIN. And you may have seen this article in the news that the Davenport Police Department received a $400,000 allotment in the budget from the Davenport City Council to purchase a NIBIN machine. The ATF had previously provided the state of Illinois a NIBIN machine at the Morton Crime Lab that was revoked, and they moved it to Chicago. And so we don't have access to the NIBIN network in the state of Illinois. I find that this is an opportunity for us to get involved with the Davenport Police Department. And you can see from this photo from the Quad City Times, this is what I'm asking you to allow us to do, is to use this office. And this office contains a bunch of computer equipment. When I came forward in the budget workshop, I asked for some training money to send two officers in our new gun unit to Alabama, and they have me going next week, the 27th, is that next week, I think, down to Alabama. And it's a free training, but we have to pay for their travel expenses and lodging and so forth to use this equipment. To what is the equipment? Those of you that aren't gun people, just a real quick couple pictures here. It's a tool mark examiner. And so it's a microscopic system that examines the tool marks on shell casings when they're fired. And so the police go to a shooting scene and collect these casings. Pictures are taken in the NIBIN machine of the head stamp area that shows the firing pin, the breech face, and the ejector tool marks in microscopic magnification. The science says that that's a fingerprint from a gun. And so if we have the shell casing, which is an image entered into NIBIN, and some other law enforcement agency gets the gun, and we do a test fire of that shell casing, enter that image in, it will tell us that those match. And now we have the gun, we have the shell casing, and we have more leads to go on. And so this is the Crime Gun Intelligence Center workflow that we're trying to develop on the Illinois side to partner with Iowa. And so as you see, the collection is 1, NIBIN entry is 2, and so forth as we go around. We get hits on the leads, and then we continue our investigation. And I can tell you, we have used this on a very limited basis because we don't have anybody trained, and we are getting hits. Davenport is getting an overwhelming amount of hits. And Rock Island already has someone trained because they're on an ATF task force, and they're getting hits because we are a transient population in the Quad Cities. The cities are backed up next to each other, the states are backed up next to each other, and the bad guys are going back and forth. And so we need to be able to network together to use that. And so the MOU in front of you allows us access to that office and that machine. Does not incur any costs to us. The City of Davenport has a 6-year agreement with the Correlation Center that doesn't cause any costs. So if that changes, I'll bring that back to you. And we already have the training money allotted in the budget. So I'm asking for you to approve the MOU that would allow us to use the machine at Davenport Police Department.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Schoonmaker, a second by Alderman Williams. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. The next item is also Chief Galt's Equitable Sharing Agreement and Certification.
So the equitable sharing agreement, sorry, I have to get to my next tab here. ensures effective management, promotes public confidence in the integrity of the asset forfeiture program, and protects the program against potential waste, fraud, and abuse. The Department of Justice and the Treasury establish reporting requirements that include annual submission of this ESAC form. Basically, to tell you, you've approved this form on an annual basis for at least the last 5 or 6 years that I could see in previous resolutions. It is required for us to do reporting to the federal government on what money we've seized and what money we've spent. The report that's in front of you, the large amount of money that we spent this year was to supplement the body cam bill. And so I would ask you to approve the report and the certification that is before you today.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Nguyen. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. The next item is also Chief Galt, South Park Mall Law Enforcement Services Agreement.
So for many years, we have had an agreement with South Park Mall, or the parent company, and the Allied Barton Security Services, who actually put the bill for this, to have officers assigned to South Park Mall. That agreement has changed over the years, various different days that they need to be there. When it first started, they had to be there every day from about 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., and we've changed that over the years. This is the same dollar amount that we have previously received, and it modifies the hours that we are required to be there, although the total number of hours is the same, 2,280, I believe. And we have a very, very good relationship with the mall management. It allows us, the changes that are for you today, allows us some flexibility, and I have a slide up here to show you how the mall officers fit into a newly branded unit called our Special Investigative Group that includes the 2 officers that will be trained in the MOU that you just approved in our gun unit, along with our street crimes unit, and these 3 officers that are now in this crime prevention unit that will be assigned to the mall, and to do some other things, as well as work with those other officers. And so it gives us quite a bit of flexibility. And I also asked Dirk Price to review the agreement. He, along with their counsel, made some modifications to the indemnity. So this is the only change before you, and I also did include this amount in the budget as revenue that we were anticipating. So I'd ask you to approve the agreement for 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Potter and a second by, I think it was Alderman Berg.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
It was
Oh,
Alderman
I'm
White.
sorry. Was it Alderman Parker?
Yes.
Went.
It was Alderman Nguyen.
I don't know.
Good enough.
my voice.
We have a motion by Alderman Nguyen and a second by Alderman Berg. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. We do not have an other this evening, but I did invite Chief Gall, if you could tell us a little bit about your experience and your role at the Rail Splitters Division of the Illinois chapter of the FBI National Academy Associates.
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity, Your Honor, to tell you about the FBI National Academy. So, as many of you know, I graduated from the FBI National Academy in 2017, and the NA, for short, is the premier law enforcement executive training program. Since 1935, only 51,000 law enforcement executives in the entire world have been through that program. It's at Quantico, Virginia, at the FBI Academy. And so just to tell you a little bit of background about that and the connections that I've made, the friendships that I've made, the experiences that I had there are second to none. You know, there's a group of my fellow classmates not at HMX-1, which is the Marine One, transports President of the United States. Next, there's at least 10% of the class every year, includes international students, and Phil Gray from the UK there, pictured on the screen there. And so it's 10 weeks of rigorous training and networking, as well as some physical fitness. And at the conclusion of that training, we have the opportunity to join the FBI National Academy Associates, which is 17,000 senior law enforcement executives in the United States involved in a nonprofit international organization that provides our communities with the highest level of law enforcement expertise. So I was gone last council meeting as I was being sworn as the second vice president for the Illinois chapter of the Rail Splitters Division. And the Rail Splitters Division is basically, say, 80 and south. There is a northern division, and so we come together for both the state board meeting. I will be on there for 2 years as a vice president, and then I'll be the president with my term ending in January 2023 as the president. Some of my roles, particularly in this past year, was to bring high-level law enforcement training to the FBI National Academy Rail Splitters Division. So I arranged for the Connecticut State Police to come in and do a Sandy Hook Elementary shooting debrief, the Quad Cities Leadership Consulting Group to do generational trends and leadership training. A friend of mine that I went to the NA with, the Orlando Police Department Deputy Chief Eric Smith, came in and gave us debrief on the Pulse nightclub shooting. And then we had the Joint Terrorism Task Force in give training in East Moline on sovereign citizens. We get anywhere between say 40 and 60 law enforcement executives come to those trainings 4 times a year. And so it's been very rewarding. I think it provides a lot of value both to my career and to what I can provide you here at the Moline Police Department with the connections. And you may also recognize this photo. And when I was sworn in, 2 of my colleagues surprised me and came to my swearing in here at Moline. That's Mike DeVries, who's the Deputy Chief of Downers Grove, and Lou Alessandrini, who is the Deputy Chief of New Lenox, came for my swearing in here at Moline. So great network. We do a lot of good work as well as a lot of great training, and the networking and the contacts around the world have provided me with an unbelievable resource that I can tap into for the Moline Police Department.
Thank you, Chief, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, is there any public comment this evening? Would anyone like to address the council? Please, if you would just approach the podium and.
Hello there. I'm Jacqueline Dooley, and I'm a Moline resident. And I'm also close to 12th Avenue, 19th, and downtown. Okay, that's who I am. Okay. First thing, we were talking about churches. I'd like to divide the thing into 2 kinds of churches, okay? I know this might be a little bit silly, but if a church has been there for, let's say, 50 years, it's a very, substantial church. Okay, I'm not talking about the new churches. The new churches would be the ones that would be here for, let's say, 5 years or less. So the ones that have been there for a substantial amount of time. Now, that's where I would think that would structure the structure, okay? Now, a business comes and goes. They could come and go, year to year, every 5 years. That's what we have to really work with. But for a church that's been there for a long period of time, that's the way I would like to, have everybody kind of like think about this. And I know it's a little different type of angle, but the churches with all the attendance, and the attendance is going to be, of course, the worship on Sunday and also prayer, during the week. So we have to work with that. And another thing too is we also have to work with the traffic pattern. And the traffic pattern would also be the safety, and the police would understand. I know it's only supposed to be more as like, say, a Walgreens or a CVS. But as Moline opened, and we can just take the experience of Moline as an example. For the first 30 days, there was lots of traffic. Nobody would argue with that. So we've got to work with the safety, the parking, and the structure, and how long the structure has been there. Okay? And that's all. Okay?
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to address the council this evening before we close out a committee of the whole? Hearing no other comments, we're going to close out a committee of the whole. Just a second. We'll begin the council agenda with the Pledge of Allegiance, and there will be no invocation this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Williams.
Present.
Parker.
Present.
Went.
Present.
Potter.
Present.
Moyer.
Present.
Schoonmaker.
Present.
Waldron.
Present.
Berg.
Present.
Your Honor, I request approval of Committee of the Whole and Council meeting minutes of January 14th, 2020, and appointments made during Committee of the Whole on January 21st, 2020. Second reading ordinances. Council Bill 3002-2020, an ordinance amending Chapter 4 alcoholic liquor of the Moline Code of Ordinances by amending Sections 4-3302 to 4-3307, 4-3309, 4-3310, and 4-3315 regarding the retail sale of single-serving containers of certain alcoholic liquors. Council Bill 4001-2020, a special ordinance authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a consent agreement between the City of Moline and USCOC of Greater Iowa LLC, a Delaware limited liability company, to permit a modification of equipment on city-owned property located at 1531 17th Avenue, Moline.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Berg. Roll call, please.
Alderman Potter.
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
Schoonmaker.
Aye.
Waldron.
Aye.
Berg.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries.
And that is all I have this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you.
Now for miscellaneous business of the council. Is there anything on Alderman Williams' side? Alderman Parker.
So it's been a few meetings, but I wanted to bring you up to speed with the Augustana men's basketball team. They're on a 3-game CCIW winning streak, and they have a game on Wednesday night. I guess that's tomorrow night. Big one against North Central. It's away, and Saturday's game is away, but a week from Wednesday, they're back at home again. So, let's cheer on our hometown Vikings, please.
Thank you. Alderman Nguyen.
I attended Rotary this week, and Chief Galt did a presentation there. Alderman Moyer and the mayor were there as well. And it was a terrific presentation. I learned a ton, and you did a great representation of the city and your department at Rotary. So thank you very much. You were well-prepared and very informational, so thank you.
Anything on Alderman Moyer's side? Alderman Moyer.
I guess I just want to point out the outstanding job on our streets this weekend. It was quite a mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? No, I have a couple of things. One is our second alarmers. They're looking for additional volunteers. That's an appointment situation. But I was hoping that the council would consider your friends, your family, your neighbors. If there's anybody that you think would enjoy that work or be willing to support our fire department in that way, if you could encourage them and gather their names up and let me know, and I will filter them down to the second alarmers. I have a list of people that are interested in helping the community, but it's a little bit tricky to find someone that, is looking for that kind of opportunity to support. So if you could please give me any names, I'd be grateful. And then there are a couple of other things. Earlier, or I should say at the end of last year, there were a couple of things that we sent staff back to look at, to bring back to us in January. What I'd like to do is ask the council's consideration of giving JD and his team a couple more months to work on those efforts. So one of them is, let's see. One of them is the QCOM update. We were looking for what's happening there with funding, our obligations, and our options. We have until June to make a decision on the council floor whether we're in or out. And so I would like to make sure that the council is comfortable if we could delay that a couple more months and give the team an opportunity to get that figured out. And then the other item is the road diets. We were asking for a more of a formal policy to come back in January. I did speak to Alderman Wendt about that, and JD has provided me with a list of projects that are slated for 2020 and what their status is. And so he has agreed to make sure that road diets are considered, but he's asking, this team is asking for a little bit more time to come back with that formal policy so they can get it right. So both of those things would be looked at again in March instead of January. Is everybody okay with that? Sure. Any concerns? Okay, thank you very much. Do you have anything this evening, JD?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Is there anyone on the staff that would like to address the council this evening? Is there any public comment?
Mayor?
Yes.
Your Honor, I make a motion that the council convene an executive session for the purpose of discussion of price setting for sale or lease of real property 5 ILCS 120/2C6.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Berg and a second by Alderman Wendt. Roll call, please.
Alderman Potter,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. We'll now